I am here today with Mina Farinacci. Mina, thank you so much for joining me. I'm looking forward to doing this podcast with you and excited for some of the questions that we've lined up. You'd be a great person for all of our audience to listen to.
Thank
Welcome.
you, Gary. Thank you, Gary, for having us. I don't know how much I am excited about your questions you're going to be asking me, but it's all good.
They won't be particularly challenging. Just our audience wants to know who Mina is and Mina's story. So I will start with the basics. So, Mina, tell us a little bit about you, sort of your upbringing, and then the just before the career stage. So a little bit about Mina's sort of formative years until we'll spend a bit more time on the career afterwards.
So Mina Farinacci is Italian. I don't know if you've noticed, but I come from an Italian background. My parents moved to Canada. They were born in Italy and moved to Canada. And so our upbringing was very Italian, right? My mom still today does not speak English or French, so we speak Italian at home. So your traditional Italian family, the pasta on Sundays and the prosciutto in winter, you got to prepare all of that fun stuff. So that was the main upbringing. The other thing is I'd like to mention is that growing up, often sometimes the kids are stressed of what do I have to do and all of that, and I kind of have I started one path and ended up in another path. So I actually have a Bachelor of Arts and ended up in the accounting world. So it's more to, people really you could change your career at any time. Um, no issues. And you'll end up on the right path. So you just have to believe in your path and what you're heading towards.
And I have definitely taken a page out of that advice, Mina, and I've done it myself. So I definitely encourage that. Mina, who would you say had sort of the biggest influence on you growing up?
My dad, I would say, had the biggest. He had his own business. He was an entrepreneur, so I would say he had the biggest influence.
I could see that. You connect well with entrepreneurs, so that all adds up well.
Yeah, I love entrepreneurs. I just love the way they think, the way the challenges that they have, and how they overcome it. Like, to me, that's the part that amazes me the most. How entrepreneurs don't always have it easy, but they're always positive, right? So their outlook is, their vision, the way they see things, even though they hit bumps, they're already thinking of the next part, right? And even when I speak to you, Gary, I see it also with you, right? You're a true entrepreneur. So
Thank you, Mina, and I'm glad that is there because otherwise, my dad had already been questioning my choices of leaving law and going entrepreneur. He's like, I used to be proud of my son, and now he's not even a lawyer anymore, or barely a lawyer.
yeah.
um, Mina, so now I'll go a little bit to your career. So you started in arts. How did you end up where you are today? Take us through a bit of that path. And I ask this because you're now in such a leadership position where many professionals aspire to, and especially many women aspire to. So that is a very really resonate with our audience.
So when I graduated from the Bachelor of Arts, it was a recession period, so there was no jobs, right? And so I decided to go back to school, and I was debating between doing a master's, and then someone suggested a CPA. I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know what CPA meant in those days. So I took an accounting course, and I'm like, oh, okay, and kind of started down that path. Um, and then at McGill, the way McGill worked is that you didn't need a Bachelor of Commerce. They had level one, level two, level three. So I just had to do the prerequisites, and that's how I graduated. And then when I graduated, I got a job with a firm called Hyde Houghton, which ended up merging with BDO. So for me, I've been with BDO all my life, to be honest with you. And so that's it. That's how I ended up at BDO. And then from there, I did work in industry for a couple of years before I went to BDO, and I knew that wasn't for me, right? I love the change. I love helping clients. I don't like the routine. So I knew partnership was what I wanted. So
And certainly the you've done well in it, and it is the that path is almost inevitable, to leadership through the partnership. But what inspired you to pursue leadership within BDO, Amina?
so the thing is that you're a leader whether you want to believe it or not. So every day you're a leader, right? So as a parent, you're a leader. You know, your kids are looking at you, right? And even when you're at work and as you're moving up, you're a leader, right? And every day people are watching you, right? So for me, that was important in the sense of like the positive leadership is very important for me because you make a difference, you're impacting people's lives, right? And I don't think I knew that I wanted to be a leader, but if you act like a leader, you indirectly will become a leader, right? And then I got the opportunity to be managing partner of the Quebec office. I didn't honestly, I didn't aspire to it. It came to me, right? And to be honest with you, when it happened, when they asked me, I wasn't I felt I wasn't ready for this, right? And I think a lot of people say this. You know, what will it be around in 2, 3 years, right? But I believe in just jump. Don't think twice. Don't just jump, do it, and it'll come, right? So, and that's how it came about. But I think it was important that being a positive leader and bringing ideas, that for sure helped my path when I look back now.
Well, and I think the that jump and a little bit of that imposter syndrome happens to all of us at one point in time or another, Mina. So it's that have faith in yourself and just do it when the opportunity arises is so critical, and it's come up on this podcast time after time as well.
I think I think we're harder on ourselves than everyone else around us, right? Like we hear it often saying, be kind to yourself, right? And I truly believe that it's so true, right? Because I think sometimes we're harsher on ourselves, um, and we just got to change that, some of that negative thinking of how we think of ourselves.
Well, and it is again leadership. We're presented with some of those opportunities periodically, and we need to make the most out of it. And a little bit of toughness on ourselves keeps us motivated, but at the same time, not too tough to the point where it's debilitating. So.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And Mina, and I mentioned this because the as I mean, you would have seen this throughout your career, more and more women going into accounting as sort of the space. The leadership positions also more and more diverse than they've historically been. What advice would you have, sort of, with professionals going into the space specifically to want to grow within the financial space, the accounting space, and more specifically for women doing it as well?
We definitely need more women. And what I'll be honest with you is that as women move up and just before they start having children, I really see where they start jumping, like jumping in the sense of they're looking more for a stable job. Um, but having children is honestly 10 years where they really need you. After that, they don't want you anymore, right? And even though you want to be wanted, but they don't, right? And if you could just find it and make it work for those 10 years where they really need you. And some people say you can't have it all. Honestly, you could have it all, right? You got to look at it on a 12-month basis. If you look at it on a day-to-day basis, it's not going to work, right? Because then you're constantly going, like, you're creating that stress on yourself more than anything else, right? Because you're like, oh, I finished at 6. And my kid, I wasn't able to pick them up. If you look at it that way, you'll be stressed and you feel like you're not going to have it all. But if you look at it over 12 months, right? And when you look at it, let's say in the professional world, Our busy season is really January to June, but the peak is April, right? The personal taxes, and then you got the corporate taxes in June. If you have a support system and say, like my parents were aware of it, my husband was aware of it, is like, don't bother me in April, don't bother me in June. And then like July and August, I kind of was off. So if you look at over 12 months, I did have it all, right? I did work part time. I was a part time partner, which was rare in my days, right? Like as a woman in a professional firm, that was rare. But my firm was always like 10 years in advance related to what works for people. They're very people focused. And so I worked part time, I would say 3, 4 years. I can't remember. I did 6 years, but I did a couple of years as a manager and then a couple of years as a partner. And then, like I said, it's 10 years. And then I came back full time. Now I got to beg the kids to hang out with me, right? So I think, women feel I think that it's the pressure we put on ourselves that we have to be there for our children. The
Right.
thing is that when you're working as a leader, as a professional, you're also teaching your children a lot of skills, right? And I see it today with my kids, right? Some of the things that they want to do it, and it's because they probably saw me, right? So
And I think it's interesting how much the children learn through osmosis and that exposure. I mean, to the point you made earlier, our respective teams as well, because we're leaders in many instances, and we're watched by our people around us and sort of how we act, what we do, even when we don't realize that we are, or we don't think our words and our sort of actions have as much impact as we do, but they really do. And I think this approach makes a lot of sense. And I think the it is also encouraging because, as you know, there's many professionals that say, "Can I make it through one of these professional services firms? Is it that demanding that I can't get through it, etc." So I think this is very helpful advice, and it would be appreciated.
thank you. I think anybody could make it, by the way. It's just a mindset.
Well, I think that is ultimately should be one of the conclusions. Like, hey, like you can do it. And Mina, did you have any mentors? I mean, one of the things that I found a lot, sort of doing this podcast, but also in my sort of career, is that we don't know it all, and at different stages, there's people we learn from, etc. Who resonated with you at the time? How did you learn? Like, who were sort of spheres of influence for you?
So having a mentor is very, very important. People take that for granted. The other thing is a lot of people think of a mentor as somebody older,
Right,
um, and or they think of one person also, right?
right.
And I had gone to an event. It was like a Hall of Famer in the aerospace industry, and there were 8 people that they were Hall of Famers, and all 8 talked about what changed in their career was a mentor. And I'm thinking, like, I didn't realize that, right? And I actually have 8 mentors. Maybe I need special help. I don't know, but I actually have 8 mentors. And you know what? Everybody sees things differently, right? So I do have somebody older. I also have somebody, a colleague, like on my level, but I also have somebody younger, right? Because make you see something differently. And mentors do make a huge difference, right? So you have an issue or something and you'll ask one person, they will make you see it one perspective. And then I talk to somebody else and they make me see something very different. And I'm like, oh, I didn't see it that way, right? And that just makes you a better person, right? And I do love talking to the younger people because they make me see things that maybe I didn't necessarily see it. And the world changes all the time, like whether we like it or not. So you got to embrace the change. And so they make you see things like that's differently. That's the trending that's happening that maybe we didn't necessarily think about, right? So for sure, mentors is super super important. And as more you have, and it does change throughout your career too, right? You can have a mentor, like I'm sure Gary, you've had maybe a mentor growing up, and then as you get older you might have had somebody else, right? So sometimes it does change, and sometimes it's the same person also, right? So
And Mina, I mean, couldn't agree more. And I think if you can manage 8, even better, because it's different perspectives, and you can do it. but something I found particularly helpful, I attended a leadership conference when I was 22. And it was actually a 1 week leadership conference, very sort of like you were in a remote area focused on just some of the skills, which uh, I would highly recommend to people early in their careers. One of the things they really emphasize is the importance of mentors, and they said, "Hey, look for at least three. Like you'll learn from different things." They would have been happy with eight. But I remember coming back from that, and I said, "Hey, like, I mean, it's one thing to do this, but I actually have to act on some of these now." And sort of looking for people that would take those mentorship roles. And one of the other things they talked about, which really resonated with me, is that don't be shy to ask, even people that you think are very senior or that may not have time for you, because you'll be surprised how often people make the time. And it's fine if they say no. I mean, you're right back to where you started. But like, at least if they said yes, now you actually have somebody that you wished you could have access to, and that now said yes, and you actually have access to.
Yeah.
So I asked that question because it really resonates with me. I think there's a lot we can learn, regardless of the stage of career. We never know enough, so we can always be learning from others.
And I totally agree with that comment. You never know enough, Gary. You never stop learning. Never,
Exactly.
never, right? And I see it so many times that sometimes people, they finish school and they think it's over, right? But it's not. There's just so much, and I wish I knew that. Honestly, I wish I knew that I was younger. I learned later on in my life how important it is. And like you said, you went to the leadership conference. I still today go to leadership conferences, and I always walk out with something new. And I think it's also at your point in life, like, people, you're learning things. It's hard to grasp everything they say, right? So you walk away with the 10%. And then when you take another leadership course, you're going to learn something else that maybe someone did say, they just didn't retain it, right?
Exactly.
But you can never stop learning. And, all the top, if you look at all the top notch people in the world, that's their philosophy. They never stop learning, right? So,
And I think that is consistent, Mina. Any books we read, they all talk about that continuous learning piece, and to think otherwise, especially today's world where things, especially from a technology perspective, evolve so quickly, it would be silly to think otherwise.
yeah. Well, what did they say? One book a week you're supposed to read? 50 books, 50 books a year?
I'm not quite there, but I aspire to that, Mina.
Same here. I'm not there.
Uh, I'm shifting gears a little bit, and on something that comes, or what I've identified comes across very naturally to you. So you tend to be you connect well with people, and you care about your clients, and you really take that client-centric approach. I mean, other than some of this coming naturally to you, why do you think that's important, and what did you do to think more that way, to put clients first and really to have that client-centric approach, because it makes such a difference in your practice and sort of for the organization overall?
So without clients, there is no business. So let's be frank, right? So that part is important.
Yeah.
But I have a philosophy is so I have a lifelong value or goal is having a positive impact on people, right? And building dreams, right? So if you think of it that way, right? So if I meet somebody and I walk away, the first question that comes to my mind is that I build a dream. And 99% of the time, we're going to say no, right? Because we don't realize, but our conversations are very transactional, right? There's the small talk. But if you have that objective to build a dream, you can't build a dream if you don't know the individual, right? So that is my philosophy to begin with. So when you talk with the client centric, I'm trying to build a dream, right? And in order to do that, I have to understand the client. I need to really dig deeper, I guess. And that goes internally, meaning like even, when you talk about clients, it's external clients and there's also internal clients, which are your employees, right? So, how do you at the end, we live a journey, we live a path, right? And at the end, like, where is your impact? What's the purpose of your life, right? So for me, that's how I see life. What is the purpose of my life? Is to have a positive impact on individuals as I go through my journey, right? And you know what? Life is too short not to have a positive impact. If we all thought of it that way, I think we wouldn't have wars.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And Mina, I think something you said is extremely important. And the internal clients, often we don't think of it that way because there is this serious focus on external clients, and because they help pay the bills, and that's important. But we can't forget about the internal stakeholders, because that they're the ones that help our business run. And
Yeah.
the more we're aligned with them, the better we're serving our external clients.
You know what? Building relationships, like the digital world, is fantastic, all that. But the basics, if you go back to the basics, building relationship is still important today, right? And it's the core of everything. And if you watch the movie The Blue Zones, they talk about people that live more than 100 years is because of they're building relationships, they're communicating, all of that, right? That you were still back to the core. And even when you talk to internal and external clients, that building relationship makes such a difference, right? The
100%.
communication. So it is important. I think that makes a difference also internally and externally.
Now, Mina, are there strategies you recommend to people on how they can connect better with, whether with clients, external or the internal clients? Like I said, I suspect for you a lot of this came naturally, but the it doesn't come naturally for everybody. And many strategies you've seen that work well in terms of how to build relationships more effectively.
I think everybody's different, right? So how do you build relationship with one person? We're people, right? So you could do exactly the same thing with one person, you'll do it with someone else and it doesn't work out, right? Is really understanding the other individual. Now I'm going to become technical. So I follow this thing called DISC, DISC, right? I don't know if you ever heard of it, Gary, but everybody, I kind of indirectly categorize people, right? So I know what I am, and then I try to adapt the character with the individual, right? Often, sometimes I hear people say, like, they got to adapt to me. And that is so wrong. Like, you have to adapt to the individual all the time. Like, if you want to have success in your life, you have to learn how to adapt to your internal clients and your external clients, right? If you want your external person, whatever the hell you want the individual to change, you have to change first before they change, right? It's, that your message, the way you're treating them or the way you're talking to them, if it's not working, it's you need to look at yourself first, right? So it's there is no right or wrong solution, but just talking helps, right? And sometimes it's something as basic as that.
Correct.
And today it makes it even harder to build relationships, right? Because we end up talking through text, like, seriously, right? I'm sure you have the same thing, Gary. I have text on my phone, text on my WhatsApp, text on my Teams. I don't even know where to look anymore, right? And yeah, it's great, but again, it's if you look at your text, it's all transactional, right? So if you want to go back with the mindset, it's changing your mindset. I'm here to help build the individual. You'll change your conversation naturally.
And I think if I look at it in sort of as a major takeaways, Mina, I think connecting with a high EQ approach, like where it's not just, oh, here's how I am, they're going to have to work with it. That's hard. Even if you are the most senior leader in the organization, um, yes, technically people have to listen to you, but you're not going to get the best results out of the team if you don't approach them sort of in a tailored approach, and certainly not with your clients. So I think that is critical as people build relationships. Now, Mina, we live in a hybrid world where some of this has evolved over the last 4 years. Any has any of your approach changed with this, other than more messages coming via Teams, or you still focus on the same thing?
For sure, you know what? The the virtual world has helped a lot. You could probably get a lot more done than maybe we could have before. But you can underestimate the building relationship part, right? Maybe you have to adapt a little bit. Maybe you're doing more calls. For sure, we're doing more calls than we ever done before. Um, and I still talk to the, I call them the kids, but our employees, I call them my kids. But you can underestimate showing up in person. Like your learning is in person versus virtual is like night and day, right? And networking, like if you do this today, and if you look at, as you start your job and you keep moving up, if you look right, left, the people that you start with, they'll be leaders with you in 10, 15 years. No question asked, right?
For sure.
So if you're staying home and you're trying to do your work virtually, you're not going to get that benefit, right? You're actually putting a disservice to yourself. Forget about, the organization that you work for, right? So that's something that we have to keep reiterating because we want the kids to succeed. We want them to be successful, right? So we try to tell them. I love the world that you have that flexibility now, right? Like, especially, if you're trying to balance family and personal and work and all of that, it's great to have that flexibility, meaning I don't have to be in the office 9 to 5. I could be in the office 12 to 8. I can be in the office 5 to, so we do have that. But again, if you're in the office when nobody's there, that's not helpful either, right?
For sure.
And I was even talking to my niece, and when she started during COVID, so her first 6 months she was virtual. The second 6 months they made it mandatory,
Right.
and she was very upset. But in hindsight now, she says to me, "Oh my gosh," because I couldn't compare. You can't compare how much I learned the second 6 months because what happened is your boss, your colleague, they're coming and see you, and because you're in the office, hey, can you help me with this? I don't know. That doesn't happen virtual. They're not going to call you,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I think there's pros and cons to the virtual. So there are definitely benefits way better, but there's also some of the things that we maybe you can't take it too extreme virtual. You got to try to find that balance.
Exactly. And I think, Mina, that's really the takeaway. And I mean, when we think of this practically, if you think about people under 30, they've had more than half their career done virtually, right? Like, so they often don't know the benefits of how important it is to interact and how helpful that is. So part of that nudging of like, just try this, give it a chance because it'll actually be better.
Yeah.
With especially in a hybrid setting where there's still some flexibility, but the opportunity to connect in person and emphasizing why those blue zones do as well as they did and that social connection. It's now, I mean, the social connections at work have similar benefits, both from a happiness perspective, but as well as from a work perspective.
Exactly. It's also helps like your mental health for sure, right?
And
So
you realize you're not alone, and I think this is what I found. I mean, I had people checking in with me during COVID. They're like, "Gary, are you okay? Because you were out so much. How are you doing?" And I said, "No, I'm doing fine, but I am spending a lot more time connecting with people, sort of virtually, etc." So but it was it was. And I also took it as an opportunity to readjust a little bit coming out of COVID, that like maybe as much as I was doing before COVID was probably not necessary. But I found it extremely helpful for sort of the career and building the business to be out there and connect with people. And I mean, even with us, had we not spent a lot of time in person, it wouldn't make this podcast nearly as effective as this after having that sort of connection in person. There are things you pick up on that virtually you just
yeah,
don't get the same way.
yeah. The other thing is that like when COVID hit, right? Like during your career, you're going to hit bumps, or even the life of a business, you'll hit bumps, right? And it's important to be positive about it. And because if you stick on the positive, you start seeing the opportunities. And if you look back at the COVID, the companies that did really, really well is because they started looking at, oh, hold on a second, there are opportunities that maybe I'm not looking at. And the ones that didn't do too well, they just accepted what happened and didn't do anything about it, right? So having that open mindset and looking out, like every time you hit a bump, is just say, okay, there's an opportunity here. Where is it? Right? And
Yeah.
just kind of looking, that definitely helps too.
As you said earlier, we're leaders even when we don't know it. So that some leadership then would have been that difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm shifting gears again, Mina, and this a little bit around innovation. You've been a very innovative person and sort of pushed innovation within BDO. Um, Tell me a little bit about what motivates you to do that, and some of the approaches how you've done some of that.
Never stop learning. So that um, you have to embrace change, right?
Right.
So when you embrace change, you're always looking for the opportunity, the open window, and then it's trial and error, right? Like there is no um, rocket science, like we're not looking for. And when we talk about innovation, it's innovation is not like, oh, I've created, the next Apple or Apple phone or something like that. Innovation is every day, right? Like it's the way you act with clients, the way you act with your employees. Making these little changes just makes you a better person, but you're also going with the trend that's happening in there, right? And when you look at the companies, like I don't know if you ever read the book Good to Great.
Uh,
Yeah, so if you look at that book, the companies that they analyzed then, that they were like great companies, do you know how many are left from that Good to Great? It's
about a
like a
third.
handful,
Yeah, exactly.
right? And so what happened is because people didn't adapt, they didn't innovate, they didn't. You understand? You become status quo, right? And that is a business, but even as an individual, you got to look at it in all aspect, right? So you always have to embrace the innovation. So if you have that mindset, you indirectly are innovating without even realizing it, right? So I try to walk away of, any training I do or any conversation I do. I always try to write it down. I just find if I don't write it down, it's like in and out and it's gone my head. And then kind of go back and look at it. I'm like, oh yeah, I said I was going to do this, right? And that's the innovation. That when you look at work wise, I work for a firm like our CEO is big on innovation, right? So he's constantly looking ways on how to improve. How do you improve the client service? How do you up it, right? How do you become obsessed with client service? Like that's what it is, right? If you're obsessed with client service, you are in tune with what the client needs and what the client is asking for, and not necessarily I'm selling a service. I'm helping the client. Like that's there is a difference, right? I see it so many times when you talk to people, they're selling you something, right? Like, but that's not what I want. That's not what I need, right?
Of course.
And sometimes the help could be unrelated to BDO or unrelated to any services you're doing it, right? And I find, Gary, you do this really well. I've seen you in action, by the way. And you're like really in tune with the people. Like when you listen, you have great listening skills, by the way. Right? I don't
Thank
know
you.
if anybody told you that, but you do have great listening skills. And when you're talking to people, but you really listen to what they're saying and you indirectly adapt to what their, to their needs and trying to always be there to help them, right? So I think that makes a difference.
And Mina, I'm so glad we're recording this because I'm going to have my wife listen to it and say, "Look, Mina thinks I have great listening skills."
You're just gonna say, I really want to meet this girl. She must be.
No, but I think Mina, and you, so many important points that you just brought up. I think the good to great. One of the things I took from that book was the enemy of good, or the enemy of great is good. When things are good, you often don't think, "Oh, what else should I do to make it better?" And then, as you described, most of those companies that were used there as examples now don't even exist anymore, and that's for that very reason. Because maybe at that one point they stopped. Maybe they failed on their own. They became good, and they were like, "Oh, maybe it wouldn't need to be great." And I think that continuous process, that healthy dose of paranoia, of like keep evolving, is important. And that's, I mean, it really resonates with me. And I think in any industry, like thinking that way and continuously evolving, because it is a continuous process. And I feel it's supercharged more in the age of technology, because before technology was evolving as quickly as it is now, maybe it was about making processes better and sort of approaches, etc. Now you have to think process and technology and all
Yeah.
intertwined in one shot.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
such a fun
if
topic.
you look back at Amazon, Jeff Bezos, right? And he started with selling books, right?
Yeah, of
But
course.
he was so obsessed with client service, and he saw some of that feedback coming back, and I mean, that's how he became innovative, and that's why they're here, where they are today, right?
Of course.
But again, that's business related. But even as an individual, you can never stop innovating, in everything you do.
Everything is an iterative process. It doesn't happen overnight, but you said earlier, think of it in 12-month increments. Even if you think of your personal evolution in 12-month increments, often you'll see within 1 year how many things change. Because when you see it daily, perhaps the delta is not substantial. But uh, I'm going to use that 12-month increments, Mina. I've been taking a lot of mental notes while doing this, and I'll be taking physical notes when I listen to the recording.
Sounds good.
And Mina, I'm pivoting again, and part of it is you've also spent a fair bit of time. We talked about digital and sort of how you've approached innovation, and that certainly applies to digital as well. Um, the In terms of cybersecurity, it's become a critical issue, and I know BDO has sort of spends a lot of time and resources on it, and advises on it. What, how should leaders approach it? Any piece of advice that you've seen work well?
People underestimate the issues of cybersecurity, right? There is so many hackers. There are so like they keep creating new ways, right? And even if you analyze your system as a whole and you say, oh, okay, I'm good. The thing is like 6 months later, you're already old again, right? Like the world changed so much. And I feel organizations don't spend enough money on the cybersecurity part. If your business gets hit, I mean, you think about this, right? You have confidential information and you get hit, and that confidential information gets out, like it's huge, right? That you lose the trust of your brand, your company, and all of that. And we spend tons of money on a whole bunch of other stuff, right? I just feel organizations are still today take that part for granted, right? So you have your financial, you do your medical checkup every year.
That's right.
I think you should do a cybersecurity checkup every year, right? And it might cost you a couple of $1,000s, but it's going to save you tons later on. It's a bit like insurance, right? You pay insurance. Why do you pay insurance? In case something goes wrong, right? It's the same thing with cybersecurity, right? And with the digital world today, we don't have a choice, right? Like everything is on cloud, everything is on. So organizations that the cybersecurity is important don't take it for granted, right? So, but I keep seeing it, that people take it. They'll do the one-time check and they think they're good for 10 years, but you're not, unfortunately, right? So
No, and I think that can again continuous approach, because even if you think about all the problematic sort of actors in the marketplace, they're evolving as well. It's sort of cat and mouse game. As more sophisticated defenses, they find ways around it. So I think that consistent evolution is key.
yeah. The other thing is that also is teaching, training your employees, right? The type of emails they get. I mean, I've seen it several times with my clients. Suppliers sending an email, I changed a bank account. So what do? They just change it and pay, right? Like having these internal controls is also important to protect yourself, right? I mean, I've seen so many companies lose like hundred thousands of dollars because the employee thought, their boss sent them an email, which wasn't
That's
their
right.
boss, right? And the thing is that these are the things that we know today, right? Like you're saying, oh, I've read about this, I've told my employees. The thing is that they're already 10 steps ahead. They're coming up with new ways, right? So continuously talking to your employees how important this is and be vigilant. That's also a good reminder. And always look out, new ways of how people are hacking, so that you can train your employees.
And Mina, I was actually moderating a panel of sort of a legal innovation panel around cybersecurity, and one of the speakers said, now sort of the hackers have evolved to a point where they'll have access to your system and they'll be monitoring things so that they understand your internal behavior so they can make the biggest impact when they finally strike. So you almost have to act like, what happens if somebody is already has access to an internal? That really resonated with me. I said, that's scary, but
It
you can
is.
see how that's feasible, because typically if somebody strikes right away, then okay, you mitigate the damage. So what if somebody has access somehow, it's monitoring? So that's again, that healthy dose of paranoia I brought up earlier, just different context, but it's probably a good thing to be aware of.
It is. It's very scary, honestly. Like you hear the stories, you hear, how they take advantage of, So I mean, I have tons of stories that actually happened with my clients, and it's just scary, honestly. So you kind of underestimate, and I still see today people, businesses are underestimating this part.
And I'm switching topics on you again, Mina, just because there's so much to cover and so much I want to talk to you about. But you have a very positive disposition, and you're known for your dynamic style. How do you foster sort of positive working environment? How do you help foster that? Like, what advice do you have for leaders that are looking to do that internally in their organizations?
So when you wake up in the morning, you choose to be positive or you choose not to be positive, right? Like we don't realize how external forces affect our behavior sometimes, right? So it's something that I continuously work on. Like yes, I'm a very positive person, but I have to continue working on it because it's easy, right? Like it rains, it's like, oh, it's raining, right? But if you think about people that inspire you, are they negative?
There, you never get a negative person inspiring you.
Exactly, right? So, don't you want to be an inspiring leader to your children, to your family, to your team, like to your clients? You want to be an inspiring person. You have to be positive, right? And being positive does not mean that I'm ignoring problems. Like some people think that, oh, but you're positive, you're not a realist. Absolutely not. Positive people see the problem, but they're in solution mode right away. And when stats show, by the way, Harvard has done a study on this, that positive people have more success in their career. First of all, they get their team to be more productive. There's like so many benefits related to that, right? Just by the facts, people should be positive, right? But it also helps you mentally. It also helps you, and you want to have again that positive impact on an individual, right? When you walk away from a positive person, you're energized, right? And imagine like, oh, hi Gary, how are you? How do you walk away from that, right? So and then what are you teaching your children? Like for me, that's also important because we take things for granted, right? And your team at work, right? They're looking at you, right? What do you want them to walk away? They want to. So if you're working for a positive person, you're much more engaged. It's much more exciting to go to work, right? So for me, that is super, super important. And I'm trying to keep converting one person at a time.
Well, and it's so critical, Mina. So I think that conversion, you can never go wrong with converting people to be more positive.
Yeah.
Uh, Mina, I have so many more questions for you, but I am going to pivot, being mindful of our time, to the final portion of our podcast, which is what we call rapid fire questions.
Ooh.
So these ones are first word that comes to mind, word or phrase that comes to mind. It's supposed to be fun, and now we're past the business stage. So the first question for you: what is your favorite word or phrase?
Positive leadership.
I mean, we were just talking about it, so that truly is. What word or phrase do you hate?
What word or phrase I hate? I don't know if it's a phrase or problems with no solutions. Drives me crazy.
Don't give me the problems, come to me with a suggested solution. I couldn't
Yeah, yeah,
agree more.
yeah. Yeah.
What word do you have a hard time pronouncing, if any?
Oh my God, there's so many of them. I'm gonna say it. I can't even pronounce it. Esophagus. Esophagus. I struggle with that one.
Uh, I mean, that's not supposed to be an easy word, anyways. Now, I know you're multilingual. So, what is your favorite word or phrase in another language?
I don't know if I'm not sure I'm allowed to say it. Eccellento.
Okay, see, that works. That works. And
I had
for the
something else
audience,
in mind, but I don't think it would work for the podcast.
that was in Italian. The and Mina, this brings me to my next question: how many languages do you speak?
Three.
And for the audience, those are French, Spanish, and sorry, French, Italian, and English. Spanish is aspirational.
Yeah, exactly. Not there
And
yet.
the last rapid fire question, Mina. Um, one word to describe yourself by.
One word to describe myself: energizer.
I tend to agree. And the
I have
energizer.
lots of energy. Yeah, I have lots of energy.
No, and Mina, I really appreciate your time today. It's thank you for joining us on Firing on All Syllables. So great to have you here, and I know the audience was looking forward to it. And to all our audience, sign up for our newsletter. Stay up to date. There's many more of these coming up, many episodes, and the link will be in the description of this podcast. So it's a great way to actually stay in touch more with us. Thank you again, Mina, for joining me today.
Thank you, Gary. You were honestly, you were awesome. Thank you very much. I truly appreciate this.